Welcome to Shifting from Grudge to Grit, Grace, and Gratitude. I'm Anissa Teron, your host, with my co-host Jamila, who is in an Uber, and we like to keep it real here. So at least she shows up no matter where she is, no matter if she's having breakfast or lunch at, I should say breakfast at almost dinner time. And we just like to keep it real here. So welcome, Beth Jones. For those that don't know, Beth Jones has a passion for helping other survivors of trauma and abuse to walk their healing pathways. And this led her to write her forthcoming book. Today's conversation is about HEAL, but the acronym stands for a journey of hope, evolution, and love.
Yeah.
I loved when I read that. It was like, this is so awesome, right? To be able to put that acronym out there in that way. But let's read a bit more about her. Becoming an empowered survivor, you too can heal from trauma and abuse is the forthcoming book. This book, along with the creation of the Empowered Survivors community, I love the language that you use in your bio, empowered survivors, right?
Yes.
Means that we don't need to stay in suffering. We're empowered.
That's right.
Has become a beacon of inspiration for many. Audiences feel the joy she radiates as a testament to the power of healing. And for some, she will spark the beginning of their transformation. With deep Texan roots, I know you're sitting in Austin now, you said.
Near Austin,
Beth is a citizen of the world. I love this part too. A citizen of the world, having grown up in the Middle East and Southeast Asia. I want to hear more about that. Through her international experience, she has a global perspective and deep understanding of human suffering. Currently, she resides in Dallas, Texas. Beth became a best-selling author by contributing a chapter about her life experience to the collaborative book, Step Into Your Brave, uplifting stories to inspire courage, strength, and growth. And so I just want to acknowledge Ronald. Thank you for being here once again. I just said to Beth that she'll feel quite at home with people from home that is joining in. Thank you, Ronald, for being here with us as always. Jamila, we'll see your face, your beautiful face, the moment you're out of that Uber. And we're going to kick this off. Those that are here on Instagram, YouTube, thank you for being here with us always and showing your commitment in every week, just investing that hour with us. Do make it interactive and engaging. Beth is here to answer any questions, share her experience, connect with her in whichever way you feel fit today. So without further ado, I mean, when we spoke, we didn't even speak much until a few moments ago. But I said to Beth that when I connected with her, I just felt so energetically aligned to her vibe and the way she shows up in the social realms. But before you got to this energetic space that you are in now, there was always this hero's journey that we all embark on. And I'd love for you to start at any given point of your journey that you'd like to share with our audience here today. Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. First, I'm very happy to be here with both of you. And I'll reiterate what you said to your audience. Please ask me questions. I love to get questions. So ask away. My hero's journey, actually that's how my therapist refers to it for me, that I've walked the hero's journey, which is pretty cool to hear your trauma therapist say that about you, because you've made a lot of progress at that point. The place that I like to start with my journey is sort of the top of my own story arc, as we refer to it. So where my life radically changed. And that was one day about 4 years ago when I casually walked into a hypnotherapy session. And I thought I was going to get some help because I was having trouble building deep relationships with people. And I'd taken a new role in my former life, my former professional career. And I had responsibility for a pretty large team across Asia. I was living in Hong Kong at the time. And I was going to have to forge much deeper relationships with the team that I was responsible for, but also our clients. And I had, I could interact with people just fine, but my work previously had been really about executing on projects. And now it was really about working with people, much more so working with people. And I felt constrained by that. I was like, I'm nervous. I'm worried about being successful in this new role and doing that. I mentioned it to my medical doctor one day, and she's like, "Oh, well, we have this woman on staff who's a hypnotherapist, and she helps people if they want to quit smoking or they want to lose weight. So maybe she can help you." And I literally had no idea what was going to happen. And I tell people, the person who walked into that room that day never walked out. I was literally reborn and began my personal and professional now transformation that day. So that's where it all began. It was in June of 2020. So just a little over 4 years ago is where it began.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So, I mean, hypnotherapy.
Yeah.
The jury's out on hypnotherapy, whether it's a good thing to do, whether it isn't a good thing to do. But take us on when you went into that room and you experienced hypnotherapy for the first time.
Yeah.
How did you go in? Did you go in with trepidation?
No, I didn't. No. So throughout my life, I've been through a lot of different therapy modalities. I'm very open to it. I've had varying success, and pre-hypnotherapy, I never really had the success that I needed for the most part. There are a couple of therapy modalities that I engage with. For example, somatic movement therapy. So I did some work there for a few sessions about 2 years before the hypnotherapy. And that helped to start move emotion out of me. So I lived literally, when I went to hypnotherapy, I literally lived, at that point, I had 45 years of experiences and emotion stuck in my body.
Yeah.
Right. I'd never processed it and let it out. And that somatic movement therapy started to move some of that out for me, but I still had no idea what I was facing, what was coming for me when I went to the hypnotherapy. So I'd had so much experience with individual therapy and couples therapy before that. I was like, what's one more? I'm like, sure, I'll give it a try. No big deal. Right. So I sort of went in without expectation, maybe a bit skeptical, because the somatic movement therapy had really helped me. But beyond that, I really hadn't received any help from therapy, but I was still very open-minded to it because I'm like, I know these people are trying to help. And I always felt a deep innate need inside of me to get help. I had no idea why. And I never found a therapist really that I could connect with or that would take the time to observe me sitting in their office week after week, sobbing and crying and say, oh, maybe we should try to figure out what's going on here and see if we can help you. I never had that happen to me. And so when I went to the hypnotherapy, I was literally like, what's one more? Let's give it a try. What can possibly happen? That was, I laugh about it now because what happened was one of the most terrifying things I've ever been through in my life. But I had no expectation that what happened was going to happen. None at all.
I like the fact that you're talking about the story arc, and so there was a particular narrative that you were leading your life with. As we all do, we have the story that we connect to, and these stories become part of our lives. And they're one version of our truth. I'm going to say our truths. And then there's other versions of that. And there's the potential to rewrite it. And so when you went into the therapist room, and, I suppose that was the opportunity to step into the unknown. And even though you had all these modalities, it was still an unknown. And it's very difficult for us to take that step out of our comfort zone. But in the trauma and the past experiences, those have all shaped you. But what is the one thing that, I'm getting a sense that there was a bit of imposter syndrome in building these relationships.
Oh, absolutely.
But that would have stemmed from somewhere, because that's an assumed adaptation we take on in our former years through an experience, an event, or some life-defining moment. Do you want to maybe share with us where this concern or fear or doubt of connecting and cultivating meaningful relationships started from?
I'm glad you asked me that question and not the question specifically about the imposter syndrome, because that's one of those ones that I still try to understand exactly. That's like the tail end of that's left in me a little bit. And, maybe it always will be. I don't know.
Beth, if it makes you feel any better, imposter syndrome will be with us. And I say us, all of us, indefinitely.
True. Yeah,
it's just how much of a voice do we give it? Is it going to be loud or is it going to be softer? So I'm going to leave you to respond to the other part.
Yeah, well, and mine was coupled with a very, very aggressive inner critic. And so I've really done a lot of work to quiet that person down.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed
Yes.
with that, the imposter syndrome goes away a little bit. I think as it relates to the relationships and what I ultimately discovered is when I said before that all of the emotion and my experiences and the emotion attached to those were stuck inside of me, they were, but it was really this fortress I had built around myself. And so the moment that I came back to conscious awareness that day in the hypnotherapy, I immediately met this wall that at that point in time was 45 years tall and 45 years thick, right? So I was 50 at the time. The first time that I was abused, I was 5. And so for those 45 years, from 5 to 50, because of all the experiences I'd had, I just built this massive wall around me to protect me. But I had built that wall so well that I was alone and lonely behind it by the time that I went to hypnotherapy. So I had literally exiled everybody in my life, all of my family, all of my friends, anybody in my life who really knew me or wanted to know me or could have given me the support, help meet my emotional needs. All of those people were completely on the outside of that wall. I was married through all of this. I don't, that's when I try to figure out sort of, obviously, my husband was in my life daily. He was there all of the time, but it wasn't our relationship in the last, I don't know, probably 10, 15 years of our marriage, those last years was more transactional in nature than actually being a supportive nature. We're both survivors, and I understand why we came together and why we lived our life the way that we did. But at the end, I was very much alone and lonely. And that wall, people couldn't get in through that wall to me. But more scary to me when I discovered the wall was that I couldn't get out of it to them. And so that prevented me from being able to engage in deep, authentic, open, transparent relationships with people, right? And so that's, it literally was a barrier around me. And so my journey, my healing journey has, really a big part of that has been about breaking that wall down, right? So you get this me instead of the me 4 years ago who wouldn't tell you anything, because a lot of it I didn't know. Literally, I did not know about myself. And there are reasons for that. So I had to, went on deep self-discovery to understand who I really am. And I can now share that with you, but I couldn't back then because I had built this fortress around myself.
No, for sure. Because I don't know if you're familiar with the work of positive intelligence. His name is Shazad Shamin, and he speaks about the saboteurs. And the saboteurs is really our survival region of our brain, and it's very difficult because those are formed in our very early years. And when you put on or add on trauma and pain and shame that attaches to that, it is absolutely difficult. We don't know how to do any different or be or show up any differently. So as you rightly say, you may have had people reach out to you, but it didn't matter. The loneliness that you felt was your own, like you've said, your own barrier, own wall, because no matter who would have reached out, it's that the fear that, so the victim saboteur would have ruled your life potentially, and you may tell me if I'm right or wrong, because I certainly am a recovering victim and people pleaser and hyperachiever and controller and being restless. Those are just some of the saboteurs that were formed in my early years based on survival, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But when we shift into the sage region, which is the thriving region of our brain. But it takes courage and boldness and determination to step into that. And we're never quite alone. So I'd like to ask you, who was with you other than your therapist as your wise sage to now cross that threshold? Because you're not yet, even if you cross the threshold, as we know within this hero's journey, we still need to face dark trials and our shadows within that period.
Yeah.
Who was by your side and how did you overcome that part?
Yeah. I can't say enough about my trauma therapist, who's amazing. So I had to, so you mentioned the acronym for me, HEAL, and that
Yeah.
that acronym ends with the word love, because a lot of my journey is about been exploring and understanding love broadly, what it is, how we participated, how we give, how we receive, right? So broadly, and I've explored that across a number of relationships. That journey really began with me about 2 weeks after the hypnotherapy. So that day in hypnotherapy, I mentioned to you that it was a rebirth event for me.
Yeah.
And the person who walked in never walked out of that room. But the person who walked out that day, the new person, the starting point was deep despair and hopelessness, right? And, my acronym begins with hope for a reason, that I was hopeless. I already had that sense of hopelessness when I walked out of that room. I'm a natural born problem solver and very hopeful person, very optimistic person, but I was suddenly facing a proposition. I was like, I woke up, I'm like, who am I and what has happened to me? And I literally had no idea suddenly who I was. It was a very scary place to be. And I immediately went into a very dark, hopeless place and a lot of despair. About 2 weeks after that event, I was starting to become overwhelmed by that feeling of hopelessness and despair. And so I reached out to two women who had, we were friends, and we had been colleagues first, right? I worked with one, and the other one was a client actually at the time. And, so we knew each other professionally, and, our conversations had started to get a little bit deeper. I mean, it's your typical expat community, right? I mean, in Hong Kong, it's the typical expat connections you try, transient expat connections you make with people as you live in various places like that. And they were the first who I felt like comfortable enough reaching out to, right? And at the time, I was really confused about what was happening to me. And I didn't have the vocabulary that I have today to be able to explain what was happening, right? I was using this very disjointed words and kind of all over the place that day that I was telling them and reaching out for help. And, those two women, that words were very like conceptual. And actually, if you read the definitions of some of my survivors, like sorry, I bumped a minute from my internet. Dissociation is something that I've suffered from. Am I with you? Oh yeah,
yes,
I'm here. Sorry, am I with you?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I'm here. Are you there? Oh, come on.
Can you hear me, Beth? Okay, so it looks we're having some technical difficulty. I am just going to wait for Beth to come back on. Whilst that's happening, I'm going to say thank you to Ronald for that beautiful comment. And I'll put it back on. I'm not going to take all the credit. I think we have walked alongside one another in this journey, but thank you for mentioning that. And then once the mask comes off, God helps us. Absolutely. I agree on that, Ronald. It's the superficial mask that we keep wearing. I just want to see what's happening with my guests. Let's get back. Jamila. Jamila's on. Can you hear me, Jamila? We can't hear you. You're on mute.
Hi, Anissa. How are you?
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I think we lost Beth there, and something just went completely. It went completely wonky, and we lost her. I just want. She's back. She's back. Let's get her back to stage.
Can you hear me?
Are you back, Beth? Still coming.
There we go.
Hello.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm trying. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes. Yeah. You're back.
All right. All right. Is that better? Getting better?
It's getting
Oh
Yes,
my
better.
I can
goodness.
hear you, but
Technology,
your
right?
picture is
Crazy.
frozen.
Is that better? You can hear me now? No.
Yes.
Okay. I'm back. Okay.
You
Good.
back.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Absolutely. Please proceed. This is
Can
Jamila.
you hear
Let me
me?
introduce her to you officially.
Yeah,
Hello,
my
Beth.
internet
How
just
are
went down, of
you?
course, as it does.
Let me just
Yeah.
message
It's
her.
trying to come back. It's
We
a
can
little bit.
hear you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you,
Yes.
Beth. Oh, she's gone
Oh,
again.
there she's gone again. Jamila, whilst we're waiting for her to return, how has things been your side?
It's hectic as usual, but I wouldn't have it any other way, Anissa. I think that's one thing that COVID taught me. Never
Yes.
complain about being busy.
No, not at all. She's trying to rejoin from her phone so we can continue. But I quite like this concept around HEAL, which stands for hope, evolution, and love. When I read
Love.
it, it was like so powerful. And I'm sure you heard me earlier say that the language that she even uses in her bio, it's not that of being a victim, but it takes having been in that victim mode, in the suffering space, to finally emerge. And I think she said it earlier on. She mentioned something about she never had the language that she has today to frame it correctly. And in fact, she was in deep despair, as we always are during our difficult periods.
Absolutely. And as we meet new people, as we start to educate ourselves more, we acquire that language and we learn it. But
Hmm.
what we never ever lose is that relatability, from
Mm.
having experienced this, where you are able to share with others and help others as well. I was
Yeah.
late because I was at a paddle fundraiser event, and it was such a beautiful one. It was a last minute decision, but as soon as I heard what the cause was for, it was stepping ahead to help people um, to recover from GBV. Um,
Oh,
and
yeah.
we were just having
Absolutely.
this
You have to
exact
grab it.
same conversation then about, being able to be there, but from a
Okay.
sense of understanding, from a sense of experience, and knowing exactly what the person is going through. And most
Mm.
times when you're going through this, you're so
Okay.
isolated. But
Can you hear me
I
now?
Beth, we can hear you. We
Oh,
can
it keeps
see
freezing.
you.
I have no idea what's
That's
going
much
on.
better.
Well, I do. The
It's not
internet is.
Mercury retrograde in any way,
Okay.
right? There's no, I don't think anything is in retrograde
no,
right now. We're out of that.
I don't know. It seems like retrograde follows me around. So, can you hear me?
We
yes.
can. We
Okay,
can.
good. All right. My phone didn't want to work. Nothing wanted to work to get me back on. So hopefully we're good now. So sorry about that. just
So
the way
where
it
did
is.
we leave? Where did we leave off that conversation? Where did we
You
end?
were asking me about the support, the people that came into my life to help me down the journey.
And
And I
your
was
two
telling you
ladies.
about, the two women. So I was telling you that, I didn't have the vocabulary that I have today to describe either the traumas I've been through or the way that I was living my life, my survivorship. And dissociation is a good example of that, which I've suffered from in various forms throughout my life. And I could describe to you what was happening to me, but I didn't have that term, dissociation.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
I've told people, so I'm going to kind of bring a couple of main beings that supported me together here now with this, what I'm going to tell you. So I'm deeply spiritual, and my spirituality, my spiritual guides, universe, God, however you want to refer to the higher power, that being has for sure been with me my whole life. But for sure, I could really see that power. I tell people I've been on a divinely led pathway since the moment I began my healing journey. And I've had a number of times throughout my healing journey when I've literally felt the hand of God come down and touch me and letting me know you're on your pathway, you're moving along the way you should be, everything is going to be okay, just go with it, right? Kind of like a reassurance hand touching me. So I call my universe touches. And the first time this happened to me was that night when I was talking to these two women, and I learned that night that one of them in the early days of her career had been a prosecutor, and she had prosecuted perpetrators of child sexual abuse, which was my first traumatic experience when I was 5. And so although I didn't really know what I was saying, I literally had no idea. The words were just coming out of my mouth. I'm just pouring all of this stuff out. She knew exactly what I was saying. And so she starts returning to me words like dissociation and trauma. And, you've been traumatized. You need help. You're sick. You need a trauma therapist. That's, dissociation. She's saying all these things to me that I'd never heard associated with me before. I've heard the terms, but I'd never put them with myself before. And so that sent me down a path that sent me on to get me all of the help that I've had since then. But the two of those women, that was the first time that I think that I really ever experienced, perhaps, but definitely ever recognized, but it could be the first time I ever experienced unconditional love. So two people just looking at this person who they had known in one way before that night, mostly professionally, a little bit personally, but mostly professionally. And now suddenly I'm telling them all of these, which I'm sure probably sounded like fantastical stories to them at the time, but they really embraced me and were there for me through the hardest part of my journey, and really did some phenomenal things for me. I had this really cool experience with them where I could get angry from time to time about things that I was dealing with. And I could call them up and just like throw the anger out there. And then they would get mad with me. And when they did that, I was like, oh, somebody else is mad about this. So like, I don't have to be anymore. And I would like transfer my anger to them, of course, because it was mine and not theirs. They would take it for like the conversation and then they'd be done with it and it would just go away. The anger would be gone. Right. So they were instrumental in helping me, and still, will always be part of my tribe. But it was really my first point of stop on the exploration of love, was experiencing that with them. And then as my healing journey progressed and I dealt with some unhealthy relationships that I needed to deal with, and I did some healing from some of them and changed the way that I was interacting with some of those unhealthy relationships, that led me to a place where I got healthy enough to where I wanted to start reclaiming relationships. So all those people who I'd exiled, those people that I wanted to bring back into my life, I did that work to go to them and say, hey, most of them came back into my life, without any adjustment. But I tell people one of the choices that we have when we're dealing with hurtful relationships, you can either live in it the way that it always was and not do anything about it, and you continue to suffer. You can make that choice. You can end it, which I did that with my parents. And the consequence of that, of course, was that I didn't have my parents in my life anymore, but my sister and her kids went with that. Was an unintended consequence that I got as a result of that. And plus most of my other family. And I reclaimed the relationship with my sister first. And then I got to a point where I wanted to bring my parents back into my life. And I did that by setting boundaries, because there had been reasons why I had exiled them. But when I brought them back in, we did it with boundaries that I needed, that have helped me to be able to engage and work on that relationship, which, it's a beautiful part of the story, right? I think it's one of the most amazing things about my journey with love is being able to get to that point with my parents, that I was healed enough and understood myself as a survivor, and in turn them as a survivor, sufficiently to be able to bring us back together. And it's one of the greatest gifts out of my healing journey is getting my family back. But, as a progression there, to bring those people back around me that have helped me to continue to walk my healing journey and, are still with me today.
Jamila, I get goosebumps listening to these type of testimonies, because we've been there. We're still walking these journeys. There's no end destination in the hero's journey. We're going to constantly have continuous cycles of it. But what would you like to respond to, Beth, in terms of this beautiful testimony she shared?
It is indeed such a beautiful testimony, Beth. And, I have just such admiration for you. Because it's not easy bringing people back into your life. It's not easy setting those boundaries. And again, I say this, it's not just about setting boundaries for other people, but setting those boundaries for ourselves.
Absolutely.
First and foremost. And also attached to that is forgiveness. But being able to forgive yourself first before you can forgive anyone else subsequent to that. And we hold ourselves accountable to so much that we shouldn't actually be carrying on our shoulders. And as a result, we don't allow ourselves to be forgiven by us. So, the fact that you could do that, I know how much it takes. I know how difficult it is and how much of work you've got to put in to be able to do that. So great admiration for you,
Thank you.
in how far you've come.
Yeah.
I was listening to the first half of the podcast, and I think I heard you say that you were in Hong Kong and you grew up in, was it the Middle East?
Yeah, Middle East and Southeast Asia. Yeah, we moved. My parents was my dad worked for a drilling company in the oil industry, and we moved to Dubai in 1976 when I was before my 6th birthday. And then I did all my school years, a few years in Dubai, a few years in Singapore, and then most of them in Indonesia in 2 different cities. So I graduated from high school in Jakarta, and then moved back. I left that massive city. I don't know if you've been there before, but it's like it's a big city. There's a lot of traffic and a lot of people like Joburg is, and it's always been that way for as long as I can remember, like Joburg, right? And then moved to a very tiny town in East Texas to go to college. And so even though I am an American, I am a Texan, I have many generations of my family are from Texas. So, most people who know that, if that's the first thing, they're like, oh, yeah, you really are a Texas girl. It was culture shock for me coming this direction. It was an eye-opening experience, leaving what I knew internationally, right, the world, coming to a very small town in East Texas. It was an interesting experience, but but I look back on that time now. I mean, it was perhaps one of the first big steps that I took on my healing journey, because it moved me out of my home environment, and that had some challenges when I was growing up at home. I mentioned my parents are, both survivors themselves. And so, you have that, people living as survivors and not in great ways. Right. And, that included, some things with my parents. And so it was, it was probably my first big step in moving forward, because I was separating from that and now starting to go on a journey. It was, starting to go on a journey of, I was 17 when I left home.
Wow.
I had my 18th birthday, in my freshman year of college. I had my 18th birthday shortly after it began. So it was, I think, the first big step on my healing journey. I did, of course, that's like far down the road. Hindsight's 2020 seeing that now, but I think that probably was. But it was culture shock for me this way, for sure.
Yeah, I think this. You're so humble in the way that you mention about your healing journey. But from what I'm hearing, you are that cycle breaker in your family, because in as much as your parents have been survivors, like you say, the way that we survive is different from individual to individual, because you can be a survivor from an empowered point of view, or you can just be a survivor who's just managed to to outlive the experiences. But you, in your family, you are that cycle breaker. You are bringing I suppose that generational cycle to a close, and you are forging a new path going forward from a very, very empowered space, from what I can say. Anissa, do you agree?
Beth, first and foremost, that big step that you took resonates with me. Because at age 16, I also decided to leave the environment, letting go of the attachments of the identities that I knew was never meant to be my identity in the first place. The sort of conditioning, as Jamila alludes to it, is these generational things that just carries on. And for me, it was the book, The Alchemist. I don't know if you've read it.
By Paulo Coelho.
Yes.
Yeah, I have.
Listen, Beth, do you find when you read that book, every single time you read it, it takes on a different meaning and
Yes.
adaptation for
Yes,
you.
yes,
Yes.
yes, yes, yes. Which it's
So
interesting because
that was it for me.
it's called The Alchemist, about change, right? And so you're always a different person. So it sort of makes sense when you read it. It's a new lens that you read it through, right? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So yes, I agree with Jamila that you are a cycle breaker, and it takes courage to do so, because you would be almost the one that is the villain in the story. And in fact, I'm going to be doing
Yeah.
a TEDx talk around the villain and embracing our inner villain and not shaming that inner villain, because you're not showing up as this villain for the sake of lashing out. It was to come back home to yourself
Mm,
and to reconnect and have that rebirth.
mm.
And it wasn't just when you stepped into your trauma therapist room. I
That's right.
think you made the start already when you moved out, because
Yeah.
it's letting go of big things,
Mm,
parts of
mhm,
who we are, it's our identity. And
mhm.
now to give that up, that's part of the trials and the darkness that we had to face. But what for me transpires next in your story is that you no longer wanted to suppress. You wanted to almost bring it, emerge it, like it needs to come to the forefront, then rather than putting it aside. So that's why I can completely connect when you say you came out a different Beth after that
Mhm.
session you had in
Yeah,
the hypnotherapy.
yeah.
Not because you let go of her, but because you reconnected with the real true essence, the
That's
divine essence of the
That's
Beth.
exactly right. Yeah, and I tell
Mm.
people, I mean, what I did, I mean, the 4-year journey that I've been on since then was really about removing masks, right? So I had the wall that I lived behind, but I also wore all these masks behind that wall that I needed to take off. They weren't me anymore. And one of them was my professional career, which served me very well for 32 years, and I'm very grateful for it. But it was a mask that I wore, and I never really, that when I was talking earlier about that, developing deep relationships with people, that's something I always felt some resistance to. And obviously it was that wall, but I think it also was that just really wasn't my place. Right? And I was
Mm.
not, I wasn't going to be in a situation where I was going to connect with that to be my identity for my entire life, my professional identity for my entire life. And that is because my true purpose in life, and I have discovered this through the healing journey, but my purpose was to have suffered what I suffered in the trauma and abuse events, right? And if you want to use the word victim, we can. I'm not a fan of that because I've never identified that way. It's just experiences that I had, things that happened to me that other people did to me. And I didn't ask for them. I didn't invite them. They just, for whatever reason, decided
Yeah.
that's what they were going to do, how they were going to interact with me. But then I did live my life as a survivor, and I've read plenty of books, and that's how I started getting my vocabulary. I'm like, oh, there's me, there's my mom, there's my dad, there's my now ex-husband, right? I could see all of us in these books as survivors. But my real work in this lifetime is to be out spreading this healing message to people, right? So ironically for me, because that is my work in life, I had to have those 50 years of my experiences, not great experiences, then to go on this amazing healing journey so that I can share the power of that, the outcome of that with people who I hope will get on their pathway and walk the journey themselves. And I know it's hard. There are, the E part, evolving. There is that deep self-discovery work. And that's where you need the hope that I have in my age and heal, because it can get hard sometimes, as we know, and we talked a little bit about. But, I know what the outcome is, right? So for me, that's what my life really is about. And so getting that wall down, taking off all those masks, and now doing the work that I do today. And I think will, do until I feel like I'm going to not do it anymore, do something else. I don't know. That's where I am now.
Beth,
So, yeah.
tell me, I want to know, firstly, we talk about age, like one of our guests said, we are version 5.2. What is your age now in the version that you're supposed to be? Not by 50. You're talking about when you were 50. So what is your age now?
I'm 53.
Wonderful.
For one more month.
Version
I'm holding on to it.
5.3.
5.3. I'm version 5.3 of me. Soon to be 5.4.
And what was your career before this? I'm very intrigued to know, because it sounded like it was like corporate and it was
Yes.
intense and it was high pace and high pressurizing.
Yes.
And you probably did excel in it, but
Yes.
probably from a survival perspective.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. So so my training, I'm an accountant, so I'm a certified public accountant, certified here in the U.S. I'm also what they call certified in financial forensics and a certified fraud examiner. So my work for the first 10 years of my career, so I did financial statement audit, and then I went into forensic accounting, where the vast majority of that work was doing fraud and white collar crime investigations. And I did a lot of corruption and bribery work, which is why I've traveled extensively around the world doing that work, because the work I was doing was specifically about bribing foreign government officials under U.S. law that makes that illegal. And that, I thrived in that environment because it kind of engaged both of my brains, because I'm analytical, but I'm also very creative. And so that worked for me because there was the analytical piece of it, but it was always creative in the schemes and how we conducted the investigations. And, it was just always a different experience. And so I really did thrive there. Right. And that's, when I'm saying project-based, and the investigations that I worked on were, they were big. If I told you some of the companies that I've investigated, you'll go, oh, they're like headline cases that you would have known about if so it was important work that I did, because it was the investigation piece was there, but there was also the aspect of compliance and companies putting in compliance programs to try to prevent that type of conduct in their organization, but also give them the ability to detect it if it was happening and deal with it as they needed to deal with it. So, that I enjoyed the investigation piece, because I kind of like the whodunit, right? I tell people it's kind of like Enron meets Sherlock Holmes is how you can think about me, right? It was super fun work, very interesting. I mean, obviously, it's some awful things that are happening, right? One of the things why I always appreciated the work that I was doing was the outcome of that, right? Because in many of the countries where that type of bribery and corruption becomes an issue, you have huge income disparity between the people in the countries, right? And that's why it's focused on the government officials, because you sort of get this exacerbated divide of the haves and the have-nots. And as you all know where you are, in some countries that divide is massive. And when it's when an American or somebody who's tied to the U.S. is facilitating that and making it worse, particularly with my experience, is how I grew up, right? So, I see it from a very different lens than a lot of people who get into that work that are, Americans. And now, a lot of people in the UK are very active in that space as well. There are more and more laws around the world that are, becoming, have teeth in them, where we're making some progress globally on this issue. But for me, my perspective on it was quite different, because I didn't come at it from, I'm an American and it's US law. And, that's not how I approach it. I've actually lived in the environment, and I know exactly firsthand experience with many things attached to corruption and bribery. So that meant something to me, right? So I did thrive in that, I think, because the work was fun. I enjoyed it. It engaged my brain, both sides of my brain, but I also was in the world. I love being in the world. I love experiencing different cultures. And then there was a good aspect of it, right? Because it was trying to fight something that is really oppressive in this world, right?
Yeah.
So
that's why I wanted to know. I was curious to understand the context of your role before and how we can never say that the experiences, the environments, the people are not catalysts for the greater good of our transformation.
100%.
So when you speak about that role, I connect the investigative part. So in your HEAL acronym, that's the exploration part.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
It is.
So I'm connecting that dot, is that the exploratory part comes in there. And then the love aspect and acceptance also plays a big role, because you've had to learn to accept what happened, but also know that you need to lead with love.
Yes.
So the 30-something years is not in vain, I would say. That's just my observation.
No. And, and I also, a little bit on the, on the survivor side of it. I mean, that work, professionally, that work from time to time was a distraction from my personal life, which I needed. And it was a way, to get away. And, over time, as I moved to the point of where I ultimately got divorced, I can see a pattern of increasing time of being away from home. Right. And so like, I mean, if it went from, I'm traveling for a few days, I'm traveling for a week, I'm now going to 4 different countries in the next 3 weeks for this investigation. And then it went to, I'm going to move to Hong Kong. And, so it like the times got longer and longer. And when I went to Hong Kong, my husband he was intended to go with me, but because of situation in our personal life, he wasn't there very often. So I was there almost 6 years, and I don't even think he spent a whole year in Hong Kong while I was there, so there was a lot of time apart, but I just see that growing, right? So, I mean, you're right. It's also very intertwined, but I said to somebody the other day, it was like my job was like the buoy. It was like the float that kept me above, and it created problems in my marriage because of the person who my ex-husband is, however you want to say that. I don't know if he still is that person. I'm not with him, but who he was back then. But it was like I started to use the word refuge. I think the word float, buoy, that's really a good word. It kept me going, really. And I think a lot of that had to do with the nature of the word, because I don't know how much you follow or know about astrology or your audience, but so I'm born Scorpio. But my rising sign when I was born is also Scorpio. So I'm what they call Scorpio rising, double Scorpio, Scorpio rising. And basically what that means is everything that you think you know about a Scorpio gets completely flipped on its head, but it's about massive juxtapositions in the life is what that creates for people who have that combination in their natal chart. And that is so true for me. I mean, what I did for so long professionally and for myself was about bringing truth to secrets, light to dark, right? That's what I've done my entire life, right? And that's, I don't know, it's just kind of cool to me to know it's actually born that way, right? I was born this person, which is cool.
Yeah, Jamila, what are your thoughts on this? Because there's something there that I want to touch on, but I want to hear your part.
What I'm hearing also is that, you had a chance in your professional life to hold people accountable. To make sure that they stood up and took responsibility for their actions.
Yes.
And for me, from a personal perspective, in my life, like with my marriage, and with people that I interacted with as well, I could never hold them accountable. I could never hold them accountable for what they may have done to me. And when I got out of the marriage and I got into my first job, and it was one of compliance as well, I became obsessed with it because I could then hold people accountable for what their actions were. So it was like an obsession for me. And I got some satisfaction out of doing that, whereas in my personal life, I couldn't do it. But I got to a point then, obviously from, moving from job to job, but from a personal perspective, in learning more about myself, in understanding about myself, in educating myself about a lot of life lessons, for example, in forgiving myself and holding myself accountable to a lot, I was able to let go of that.
Yes.
So it always comes back to your personal journey, right?
It does. It does. And I mean, I think the important thing, and I would say to people about healing, in my experience, particularly when you start bringing up the word victim again and using that word, right? Everything for me has been about self-accountability, because those individuals may have hurt me, but the way that I was living my life as a result of that was entirely mine. Correct. And that's what I had to fix. I wasn't fixing what somebody did to me. I was fixing me, right? And healing myself is really what it was all. And that is 100% about personal accountability. Yeah.
What is it that you were going to touch on, Anissa?
So, Beth, you and I are vibing on so many levels here because the busyness, the busy corporate, like the role that I had, the 14, 16-hour days, the traveling. Okay, I didn't travel internationally. It was more domestically, but I was always busy, right? And that need to be busy was because, one, I was good at what I was doing. I felt like I belonged, and I could silence the stuff that was really going on And when I speak about victim, I certainly felt like a victim of my circumstances. And I had to shift that narrative to say, okay, hold on, where am I the co-creator?
Yeah.
And that is why I'm being treated in this way. But the busyness in the work is just a deflection, so that we didn't need, it's a vice. It's a way of not actually getting silent and really facing that inner demon, that villain that is impacting us. So yes, as you'd like to find the justice outside of yourself for others, but deep down, what the reciprocation is that you were seeking is, well, certainly from my perspective, is that I could be seen, my pain, my trauma, my wounds could be witnessed, and somebody could just hold that safe space for me. That's why I love the two people you speak about, because they almost accepted you venting and held that space for you so beautifully. So we do this, we step into that role. And so you stepped into the role of creating fairness and justness within the work that you were doing, but you needed that for you.
I did.
And only until you got to your own hero's journey, which was 4 years ago, as you say, but I think it started long ago, as you mentioned earlier. It takes, it's not an easy path to step into, because you're literally stepping into the fire. You need to be able to feel like you're going to burn, like that phoenix rising from the ashes. And you are going to die that metaphorical death. And it's part of the necessary part for the transformation. Because then you get the elixir of, okay, I understand now. That's where you got the new narrative, the language, the book. All of this is in pursuit of the pain that you had to endure. So I'm very grateful having guests on that are able and willing to come and share this story, so that it gives others the hope. That they can heal, and they can also be catalysts. Right?
That's
and it's not too late. I mean, 4 years ago, you were 49, version 4.9. How many people carry on with their pain, their trauma, their wounds until their 60s, 70s, 80s, and even up to their 90s?
Forever.
So this is an invitation.
Absolutely.
So when you share, I feel it's a great invitation.
Yeah, absolutely. It is an invitation. Yeah, man, step on your healing pathway. That's the invitation. It's not an easy journey, but it does get hard. But getting the right resources around you, and support team is a huge part of that, right? Getting the right people around you to help you on that pathway is critical, right? Which that can be scary to do that as well, because you become vulnerable, because you start to share about what's happening to you and what you've experienced, right? And that can be challenging. But my experiences has been getting to the right people has been powerful for me and helping me to walk my pathway and continue to walk it, right? I mean, I tell people I'm always going to be healing, and that's because life continues to happen, right? You continue to have the experiences you have. I just know that now I'm more resilient and much quicker to be able to respond and do the work that I need to do from the experiences that I have.
Talk to us about the book.
The book, yes, that's exciting. So the book is launching on October the 8th. It'll be available that day on Amazon, and it'll go other places after that. But for a little while, only available on Amazon. But I would love to have your audience, if you're interested in reading the book, please reach out to me and connect with me. I'll tell you how to find it. You'll see it on LinkedIn that day. Of course, I'm posting like crazy right now, as you all probably have seen on my social media, as you do when you're trying to get a book launched. The book really, the book is the book. It's part of what you do in visibility when you're trying to get a message out into the world, and that's really, it's the start of a movement, and really that movement is my mission, to bring my healing message. And do the work. I will work with individuals if they want to work with me from a facilitation standpoint. So sort of as a mentor, I call myself a healing mentor. And helping people to sort of figure out what their path is for them uniquely, because it's unique for each one of us. But it can be hard. I talk to people about sort of taking a holistic medicine approach to your healing journey. And I think when you're in you're at that point where you're sort of at the starting point and don't really know what the path forward is, which I had no idea. I just sort of figured it out, and I'm divinely led. And so part of my education to be able to help people this way was the universe taking me down that pathway. But that's really, you know, what the book is about, is getting that movement going, and my mission to get my message out into the world. And so the book helped me to crystallize my message. And it's also, you know, a great way to get to more people to hear it, right? You just get the book in your hand and you can read it, and then you can connect with me. There are QR codes at the back of the book if you have it, where you'll be able to connect directly with me. You know, so that's really what it's about. And I'm now, you know, I'm now on a journey and doing some things where I'm moving on to speak. So I'm doing a lot of this, but I know at some point in my future, I'm going to be on big stages and in big rooms. And that's a little daunting sometimes when I think about what's ahead of me, but I know it intuitively. I've been told that I've gotten that message spiritually from, I don't even know, like every person who I engage, my own intuition, what I'm receiving directly, but everybody that I engage with, or kind of my sources of my spiritual messaging, they're all telling me the same thing. And I'm like, I don't even know how you deny this, but I'm like, okay, you know, it's coming. So that's really, I mean, the book is really the start of that, you know, and it, you know, I've been out public for a while now, talking about my mission and about my work. But, you know, I mean, the book is a book, and it's fantastic, and I'm super proud of it. It's a beautiful book. It's me so much so when you look at it. It has a dragonfly. You see my dragonflies I'm wearing. It's how I brand. It's got a beautiful dragonfly on the front cover, which has meaning in the empowered survivors space. If you know, dragonfly is all about rebirth, transformation, and impermanence, and that's exactly what the empowered survivor's journey, becoming an empowered survivor, that's what that journey is about. So I'm really proud of it. But, you know, I've also been told spiritually that the book is the book, and I will do this. I'll talk about it. I am going to do a book tour because it gives me an opportunity to not focus on the book, but to tell the story in the book, and really the punchline, which is the healing message that's in the book, right? So I will do that, but I really view it that way, right? It's the start of my work and my mission to spread this message, to invite people to get on their healing pathway, to be the face of what's possible when you do that. Yeah.
Jamila, any closing questions?
I'm just listening to you, Beth, and you know, it just resonates so strongly that you have so like reconnected with self. You know, we go through our lives, and you know, we think that we're supposed to be on this path and the corporate path, and you know, we have all of these careers that are ahead of us that society deems to be required for us to be successful. But listening to you now, I mean, you just resonate such authenticity and such groundedness in your belief of who you are as a person, who you divinely and innately are. And it's just so beautiful to see and listen to, and empowering for us as well. So it's just been such a pleasure to listen to you and your story and the bravery that you display in claiming who you truly are, who we are born to be. And, you know, hopefully that there are so many more like you to help society on a whole to I think to attain that level of consciousness that we so desperately need.
Yes, I completely agree. Yes.
And that's exactly what you're doing. You're creating that. So you know, so much admiration for that.
Thank you.
Grace, anything you would like to leave our audience with in the context of either your heal movement or the topic that was at hand, shifting from grudge to grit, grace, and gratitude, and how you've embodied that, and any golden nuggets you want to leave our audience with today?
So I'll focus on the theme of the podcast. We've talked about the healing that for a little while. You know, when I first saw that, the grudge part, right? I mean, I think it's a good broad descriptor for where we are pre-healing, I would say. It's a word that for me personally, that I would say held grudges, but I was holding on to some pain attached to relationships that I had, right? I mean, they were hurtful, and I was holding on to a lot of emotion and pain. So it's probably the equivalent of the grudge, right? The grit part, right? That's like bringing the hope together with evolving, right? Because it really takes to walk this journey takes a lot of grit. And I tell people, like, commitment, right? When I committed to myself to heal, and I went with intention and focus for about 9 months, deep healing, super, super committed to doing that for myself. Right. And so I think that's the grit piece. Grace is actually something I do talk about in the book, because for me, it's not so much the concept of forgiveness, but it's about letting go. So letting go of what I held for myself, but letting go of what I held related to others. And part of getting to that place of letting go is having the grace for myself, and then having grace for those who hurt me, because I see them in a mirrored way. I see them in me, and me and them as survivors, right? So I talk about that, having that grace as part of the process of letting go. And then the gratitude. I mean, I'm like, and for me, gratitude is gratitude for my entire life. So I do have immense gratitude for the entire gift of my life. And in fact, when I was talking to you just a minute ago about stage and getting really big in the audience, is my one fear that I have is not doing right by this beautiful gift that I've been given by the universe, which is the entirety of my life, right? So yes, even the traumatic and abusive experiences that I've been through, I have gratitude for those, because they sent me on this amazing healing journey, which many times I just step out of it myself and just look at it, and I'm just in awe with how beautiful it's been, right? It is truly one of the most exquisite experiences I've ever been through. And then I'm on the other side where I'm like totally thriving in my life. And now I get to go out and share it with people, which I know is my life's purpose. So getting to that place of gratitude, I mean, I could see in my life, my progression of grudge, grit, grace to immense gratitude, right? So I think it's a great set of words together that I can definitely identify with in my own experience. Yeah.
We want to thank you. Please do stay on. We normally do a short debrief for 5 minutes, but I want to thank you for your vulnerability, for your willingness and openness to share, and for creating this beautiful movement. And for those that want to reach out to Beth, you can connect with her on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram. We will put her details into the post, or you may do that, Beth, when we're done, the same event post. And then at least people can connect with you and be part of your new movement.
Yes.
Or not a new, continue the movement.
Puppy dogs barking.
Yes.
It's okay.
So I'm going to say goodbye to the guests. Thank you for those that joined us on Instagram. I know we've been a bit silent, but we were just so immersed in this conversation. Thank you, Ronald, for your comments, your beautiful comments there. We did not read them, but I did put them up on the screen today. Yes. And Jamila, thank you for always showing up. No matter how crazy our lives are, you're always here holding the space so beautifully alongside me. And I appreciate you. Beth, so don't switch off yet. Jamila, do you just want to greet everyone?
Yes, thank you everyone for constantly showing up in this space, and to all our wonderful guests who have come on, and you, Beth, who are sharing so openly, just being so vulnerable with us and helping us to move through our lives by learning through your experiences. So thank you for that. And Anissa, as always, thank you for being such a gracious host. And we'll see you all next week.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Fantastic. I'll end the live stream.